Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sandbox. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier finale has hit Disney+, which means it's time to rank every episode from the worst to the best. Don't forget to share your ranking in the comments below. I will meet you down there so that we can talk about every little detail about this marvelous show. With that said, this is a spoiler-filled video, so consider yourself warned. Kicking off the list at number 6 is Episode 3, Power Broker. This one was a lot of fun in many ways and had some very cool scenes, breaking Zemo out of jail, Bucky going back into Winter Soldier mode, traveling to the crime cesspool that is Madripoor, and getting to catch up with Sharon Carter, who has been on the run since Civil War. Yet even with all this stuff, the episode still feels rather simple and yet rushed at the same time. It definitely feels like this episode suffered somewhere during the editing process, and this probably could have been avoided if they split the episode up into 2 episodes. 1 breaking Zemo out of jail, and then 2 having Sam and Bucky on the run from every assassin in Madripoor, similar to John Wick 3, while tracking down the scientist who has made a breakthrough with the super soldier serum. The episode we got in the end just didn't feel strong through and through, sacrificing character consistency in an effort to keep the story moving along. I'm sorry, but there is just no way that Bucky's first instinct would be to seek out Zemo, but alas, that is what we got in the end. And don't get me wrong, I loved Zemo in this. He was one of the best parts of the show for me, but I think they could have found a better way to rope him into this series than Bucky seeking him out. Also in this episode, we start to see Walker become unhinged as he starts to associate his identity with the legacy of the Shield. He's only in the episode for 40 seconds at most, and yet that one small cutaway perfectly set up the 4th episode. And part of that I have to give to Wyatt Russell, who just did such an amazing job portraying John Walker. We also get to know the Flag Smashers and their leader Karli a bit more, but this episode really needed to push them as a villain. I mean, this is the mid-season finale, but the show seemed too focused on making her relatable and wanting us to pity her and see things from her perspective. But in the end, that means that we lose a villain to root against who will push our protagonists to rise to the occasion to beat them. Just for reference, I would give episode 3 a C+ and all the rest A's and B's. This was a really hard list to nail down because every episode was doing something better than the rest while still having something to hold it back, except maybe for number 1. But I gotta pick one, so coming in at number 5 is episode 5, Truth. I thought this was a great episode. Yes, it was a tad slower than we probably wanted and expected out of the second to last episode, but I thought it was a great emotional bridge into our finale. This episode provided us with some great character moments, especially Sam and Bucky bonding, coming closer together not just as partners, but as friends as well.
We're professionals, definitely, and we're partners, co-workers.
This episode was also really heavy on themes such as the legacies we leave behind, as well as racial tension and divides, and it also offers a very provocative question, that being, how can you fight for a country that doesn't fight for you? I think this is a great question that can be applied to many different aspects within our society, but obviously here Marvel went with race, which is a highly sensitive and relevant thing today. Inevitably, Sam comes to the conclusion that I'm really happy he came to. It's the one I was rooting for since the first couple of episodes. He realizes that Isaiah Bradley sees the darkness in the world and has experienced it firsthand, and thus is very pessimistic and thinks all hope is lost. He thinks every black man should be bitter towards the world, and he isn't wrong to think that, especially given his traumatic experiences. Sam learns to see things from his perspective and to accept the past, knowing that it cannot be changed. However, Sam also realizes that he can change the future, given his status and pull within the government, and especially if he accepts the mantle of Captain America. This episode was great in a lot of ways, but it was fairly light on action, except for that amazing opening scene. So it comes a little bit lower on my list, but it might come up higher on yours. It just depends on what you're looking for in a show like this. Which leads me to number 4, the series finale, One World, One People. I think this episode paid off a lot of the series' arcs and themes, especially those regarding Sam, but it also gave us some amazing, epic fight scenes and visuals, which in the end is the thing that will draw me back the most to this show. We do get the somewhat lame reveal that Sharon is the power broker, but we also get to see Zemo get the last laugh and remain the only villain to sorta kinda win in the MCU. We see Walker come back to the light and end up as US agent, and we finally get our new, real Captain America. This episode brought back the high intensity from episode 4, and while the ending was a bit preachy, it was preachy in the best kind of way, showing us that Sam has learned his lesson from episode 5 with Isaiah and passes it on to the Senators, telling them that they need to look at things from the perspective of the people whose lives they will be changing with their decisions. Now, the big drawback for this episode was certainly how they wrapped up Bucky's arc. Bucky's arc was one of the most captivating things about this show from episode 1, and I just don't think they paid it off as well as they could have. In episode 5, Sam urged him to find someone in that list of his that needs closure, someone that he can help, not so that he feels better, but so that they feel better. And while he does go back to see Yori and explain to him how his son was killed, we don't really see him try to make Yori feel better. He kind of just dropped this huge truth bomb and then dipped. So I definitely think there was a better way to wrap up his arc, but in the end, I think the pros vastly outweigh the cons of this episode, and I look forward to rewatching it in the future. But moving on to number 3 is episode 2, The Star-Spangled Man. After the cliffhanger of the pilot episode, I was definitely itching to meet our new Captain America, and this episode did not disappoint, setting up Walker's arc fantastically and making all of America groan in unison, watching this very arrogant man try to fill Steve's shoes. I think this episode balanced every character very well and introduced Walker and Lamar, brought our two buddy cop stars on screen together, built up the movement of the Flag Smashers and established the pathos of Karli, and set up the relationship between Sam and Isaiah Bradley. Overall, it was a solid episode that set up the conflict for the show, got me invested in the characters early on, and delivered some great action sequences. But taking the number 2 spot is episode 1, New World Order. From the start, this episode kicked off with a bang, bringing back Batroc the Leaper and showcasing Falcon's moves in an epic air battle. It also delivered an interesting premise with the Flag Smashers, presenting them as a group who thought the world was better off during the blip. But again, the thing that really blew me away was where they decided to take Bucky's character after Endgame. I thought this episode set up a beautiful arc for his character as a person who has healed physically from decades of brainwashing, but now has to learn to cope with the mental scars that the Winter Soldier has left on him. Sebastian Stan's acting in this series remains the best I've seen from him as an actor, and this episode in particular really hyped me up to see where this show would take him. But coming in at number 1 is episode 4, The Whole World is Watching. After 3 episodes of setup, episode 4 feels like the main conflict has finally arisen and the show's statement of what it wants to be has been made. They teased and alluded to big things to come in the first half of the series, and I worry that they were going to hold off on any huge repercussions or reveals until the final 2 episodes, similarly to WandaVision, but they put it all out there with this episode, giving the final 2 episodes some room to breathe in letting the conflict play out in a timely manner. This episode also remains very faithful to the characters and the decisions that they make. Every decision they make in this episode feels like it's something that they would do, and it's validated by previous episodes and/or movies. Sam confronts Karli, who has been even more focused on carrying out her movement's mission, which leads to some epic fight sequences. Zemo destroys the serums, continuing his work in trying to mitigate the amount of supers in the world. The Dora Milaje show up for Zemo and embarrass Walker when he tries to refuse them, and this in turn leads to Walker becoming more unhinged and making the decision to take the serum that he found. Again, this episode just felt very faithful, progressing each character along fantastically and delivering an interesting and action-packed episode. I could talk about this episode and its callbacks and its references for hours, but I want to hear what you think, so don't forget to share your ranking down in the comments below, and let me know, which show have you enjoyed more, WandaVision or The Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Anyways, that's my ranking. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with a friend, as that is what helps the channel out the most. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I will see you all next time.